This is the concierge, sir.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and in today's episode, I actually thought it would be fun to kind of go over what it's like to open a new hotel. So, like, what is the process of when a new hotel opens, the people that actually have to work there, and how does it actually, operate? So, I think it's a fun thing to kind of look into, just because we've had so many new hotel opens. Obviously, Fontainebleau. The Cromwell actually just reopened as the Vanderpump Hotel. And essentially, what does the hiring process look like? And sort of how do teams sort of just magically end up from one property to the next? So we'll go ahead and dive into that coming up next. Okay, guys, so let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. So where I came up with this idea was, I was actually thinking of when the Fontainebleau opened, that basically the entire team from the Venetian, from one of their bars, ended up entirely going and moving over to the Fontainebleau when it opened. And this is actually not uncommon, especially when you have like a general manager or somebody who usually it's a general manager or an assistant manager that works at one property, and then they finally move and go to another property, and they're put in charge of that restaurant or that outlet. They typically bring some of their favorite people with them. A lot of times opening a new property means that you have higher seniority. You're typically going to get better shifts, whatever shift that you want usually. And you're part of an opening team, which is always kind of a fun thing that if you've never done it before, is really great. So the experience that I have with this, I haven't done it personally, but I have a friend, Diana, shout out Diana, who worked at one of the breweries at the Venetian, and their general manager ended up moving over to the Fontainebleau, the tavern, which is part of the sports book, and it's like their bar and grill essentially. And he was a general manager there. So with that, he brought over all of his favorite workers into that position. So they brought I think 3 bartenders ended up moving over to the tavern. I think they also had 5 servers end up moving over to the tavern as well. And this is not uncommon whatsoever. This happens all the time. When a new hotel opens, you'll sometimes see entire teams, especially if it's somebody in a managerial position. And this is very common in Vegas, that when a new hotel opens, people who are at director levels or manager levels that basically are the top tier or top half of their department, they will not leave. Those are the ones you don't have to worry about. Why? Because they typically have, obviously, seniority of that property. They have, a huge amount of agency at that particular place. But it's all the people that are working in the assistant managers, assistant director positions, and also people who are lower on the totem pole of seniority, maybe part-timers, maybe people who've just gotten there and don't have really good shifts, and they'll typically be the ones that move over. It's usually like the middle and the top end of seniority of like the frontline workers that typically do not move. It's because they have seniority, they have probably a schedule that they like, and they've kind of established themselves there at that property. And also, important things to note about new hotels when they do open, this is pretty common, is that new hotels, this is like a kind of a fact in the city, they overhire people all the time. So you'll get like sort of the initial rush of people that apply and get jobs at properties. Those are going to be your full-time employees, the ones that come over with those groups of managers that have moved over, directors. They'll handpick the people they want to work in the departments. And then after that, then they have to start filling in those other positions. And once you start getting to sort of the back half of that hiring process, so we'll basically put it in 3 waves. You'll have the first wave that comes through, which is your directors, which is your assistant managers that become managers or directors. Then you have their handpicked selections, which are part of sort of that first wave. And then you'll get like really highly qualified people that you don't know that are applying for that job because it's a new property. That's sort of the second wave. And the third wave is going to be all those backfill support staff, like part-timers or people that maybe were part-time at one property and they want to try going to another property and either have it as their second job or as kind of like a place to fall back on. if the place they're working at currently doesn't work out and hopefully a spot opens up. Those are the positions that are the most vulnerable. The people that backfill and that kind of thing, or seasonal workers, obviously. A lot of times you see this with front desk workers. Front desk workers, this happens all the time. Dealers, specifically in Las Vegas, tend to have some of the harder time keeping that job, especially if they're on the back half of that hiring process. Not because they're bad at their job, it's just because hotels always anticipate a huge rush of people to go into their properties, which happens for a little while, and then they kind of sort of figure out where their demand is, where they actually do need a lot of people, where they don't, and it always kind of like sort of evens itself out in that point, in that way. So that's always kind of an interesting part about new hotels opening. When new hotels open, this is just with anything, especially hotels that have like strict dates they do have to open, and really large properties. I would say this is probably very specific for Las Vegas in particular, or larger resorts, is that they tend to open up in phases. It's usually very rare that they open up ready to go. The hotels are just so big now that it very rarely happens. A really good example is like Resorts World when they opened. When Resorts World opened, they had obviously their casino floor, which is very important, the hotel rooms. I believe most of the hotel was actually done, which is actually very, very rare. But I believe most of the hotel was done for Resorts World. So the Conrad, what else do they have? The Crockfords, and then also the regular Hilton part of the hotel. So quite rare that actually does happen. Fontainebleau historically did not have all of its outlets open. So for example, Cantina Contramar, which was supposed to open with the hotel, was not open. They also had a couple other restaurants that were not open. I believe it was China Club wasn't open when it was supposed to be. And then really famously, a lot of their rooms, their very top tier rooms and suites, were not open on the top level of the hotel. It's actually kind of a really funny story that when they opened the Fontainebleau with Justin Timberlake as their headliner with Paul Anka, they threw the first dice rolls. That it was a little bit embarrassing that they had Jessica Biel posted a picture, who's married to Justin Timberlake, at the Wynn Hotel, just because it was very much like in a hallway, but everybody knew that was the Wynn property, so it didn't look good that the person that was at your grand opening wasn't staying at your hotel. I do also caution people that when they do open a new hotel, specifically for their restaurants, all the kinks are not going to be worked out. I've actually talked to a lot of coworkers who said that when they opened, there were a lot of systems that they still didn't, know not how to use, but how to communicate with everybody, like the extensions they were still figuring out, how to call different departments. So whenever you think a hotel like has their shit together, they typically don't. They're usually still figuring things out, especially on opening teams. So when you do go to a hotel right when it opens, honestly, you're going to try to get like the best service possible. Like the people are the absolute nicest because they're fresh and they really want to have like a really good first impression for you. But in terms of getting things done, doesn't always seem to happen. Not because they don't want to, but it's just because of an operational standpoint, things are never sorted out the way they're supposed to. So that always does suck. That also happens with restaurants in general. Restaurants are also very similar to hotels in that when they first open, they are getting stress tested all the time. That's why they have so many play dates. So they have usually employees that go, or they'll have friends and family that will go, and it's supposed to sort of stress out the kitchen, the wait staff, and that's when you get really good service, and then also when things are delayed quite often. So I always recommend that if you end up going to a restaurant and it's like 3 weeks after they've opened, and you didn't have like a super great experience in terms of the wait times and that kind of thing, I would always recommend trying it at least one more time, just because. And a lot of times people give it one shot and that's it. You're either in on it or you're not. But I would say for new restaurants, that is definitely something that you want to really work with. Just because if you go a second time and it's, a year and a half later or a year later and it's the same experience and nothing has changed, then yeah, it's probably a much deeper problem. But a lot of restaurants and hotels, when they first open, it never goes well. Another fun thing is that when you do open a hotel in Las Vegas, you will find that it usually opens sometime around December and January, specifically the beginning of December as we roll into January 1st or New Year's Eve. Everybody always loves to have their grand opening sometime close to New Year's Eve. It just is one of those things where they know that there's one people in town. It's sort of like you get the fireworks for free, basically, instead of having to pay for your own fireworks. I do believe that the Fontainebleau opened, I want to say, when did they open? So this is the thing, and then please reference Ocean's 13 about this, is they do have soft openings. So when they open up the doors for the first time, they fling open. That is, they're open. That's their opening of their soft open. Then they have their grand opening, typically a couple weeks later, for the hotels to sort of shake out all their kinks, all that good stuff. Really good example of this is that I went to the opening of the Resorts World. I ended up going like in the daytime. I didn't go at midnight. And the whole thing about Resorts World, which had opened like sort of the back half of COVID, was that they were going to be a cashless casino, a cashless hotel. So restaurants, casino, you are not going to have to use cash to actually pay with anything. You load it onto a card, and then it's sort of like an ATM card that you put money onto, and you work that way. Well, I went to a restaurant that was there, which is now a vegan-only restaurant. And I said, I want to order the cheeseburger. And they said, that's great. But unfortunately, right now, we are only able to process cash transactions. And that was because the entire credit card system went down. So they were specifically a cash-only hotel for that entire day, which I always think is funny. Like you think things are planned out, and then technology just doesn't want to cooperate. But yeah, when Resorts World opened, everybody always has sort of, and then this is also what happens, is that you have a vision of what you want your hotel to be. A great example of this is Steve Wynn. Steve Wynn was always really good at knowing what the clientele wanted, and then he crafted his hotel the way he wanted it to be, and those type of people flocked to that hotel. And at the time when he was opening hotels, like, in the late 80s into the mid 90s, which was really the heyday for him, he opened the Mirage in 1989. Then he opened the Treasure Island in 1995. And then in 1998, he ended up opening the Bellagio Hotel, which was the first $1 billion hotel ever built in the world. I think $1.2 billion it cost. But he always kind of knew who he wanted to bring into his hotels. So the Mirage was supposed to be that destination hotel. Nobody had ever thought of building a hotel that you went to stay at that property, to experience that property. A lot of times before, you fly into a hotel, that's where you slept, that's where you sometimes ate, and you experienced the rest of the city. The Mirage opened, and you went to the Mirage to stay at the Mirage, eat at the restaurants, go see the Dolphins, go see their shows, Siegfried and Roy, and that's why you went to the Mirage. So same thing with like the Bellagio. Like the Bellagio itself, he had built up this reputation of being such an innovative casino mogul that he wanted to build a luxury hotel. And that's sort of like the not original sin, but sort of like the turning point for Las Vegas is that for one hotel, that it was luxury. And it was really no other hotel had been focused on being luxury. Everything sort of had a theme. That was the point. But he wanted to be a luxury property. So all this to say is that he always had a vision of what his properties needed to be. And he understood the clientele that he wanted. And that's who went to those properties. Nowadays, it's much harder because you have an oversaturation of the same type of hotel, which would be luxury hotels in Las Vegas. It's much easier to find a budget hotel or economical hotel than it is to find or pick out your favorite luxury property, because all the luxury properties do offer very similar things: the Wynn, the Encore, Fontainebleau, and then you also have like the Bellagio, then you have Caesars and the Forum Tower. So they all have the Four Seasons. We have so many Aria, we have so many Cosmopolitan luxury options to choose from, is that it's oversaturated. So it's much harder for them to be able to stand out now, which is why when hotels open, as we get back to the point, is that you think you know what people you want in your property, and then they kind of tell you what they want the property to be. So this is the problem with Resorts World, is that Resorts World is just so big and they have so many outlets to choose from in terms of dining. And they want it to sort of be this gigantic like amalgamation of cuisine and cultures and deliver that to their guests. One of the big things for them is that when they opened, they had their like Asian food hall, which was supposed to be sort of like a market. I believe it's called like a something market. And it really was trying to deliver on that experience that you would get like in Singapore or Thailand, where you're walking through sort of a night market and they have like all these different Asian flavors. Then they found that like, maybe people just want like three Asian options instead of 8 Asian options. And they had a huge food hall. It would go from one end of the hotel basically to halfway through the other side of the property. And recently, you've noticed that they've actually closed off like half of that. Before that, they were always closed. So they now have like American barbecue. They still have like the duck the duck stop basically. They now have a salad bar, which I really love. They have a clay pot place. They have sushi. So they have a sweets shop. So it is funny to see how they kind of they have a fish and chips place, had to shift in terms of like what they're actually serving there. And it's really hard. It's really hard for Resorts World because they don't really know who their clientele is. Again, these very large hotels, you aren't able to really focus on one clientele if you're servicing 3 different type of players. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's actually alienated people because they'd rather stay at a property that focuses on their needs. Because we have the Conrad, we also have, we have the Conrad, we have, they have 3 properties. I totally forgot them. Oh my goodness, the Conrad. I have to remember it, but they have 3 different hotels in their property, which is ultra luxury, and then like Hilton. So it's tough. I would say Fontainebleau had a similar issue, but I think they are now delivering more on what they would like to do. I would definitely say Fontainebleau is the Instagrammers' hotel. They do cater a lot to Instagram creators, YouTube creators, sort of like new Hollywood, while like the Wynn, for example, is old money Hollywood, real estate brokers, lawyers, doctors. I would say Fontainebleau is more like the Instagram generation. So a lot of it is reflected in the restaurants that they choose, the lounges and bars, the way that the hotel looks. The spa is a really big deal there, just like the Wynn. But the Wynn has such a sort of chokehold on the clientele who comes to Vegas to gamble. They're one of the most entitled group of players in Las Vegas, and people who work at the Wynn would tell you that, because they have such a database of gamblers, which is another thing that I want to talk about when you're opening a hotel in Las Vegas. It's very important to have a huge database of active gamblers who come to Las Vegas because they really power your casino business, especially in a time where people do not gamble as much as they used to. But if you're able to get somebody who's a known gambler who comes to Vegas to put money in the casino, that is a very valuable person because they also have a network of people that they can bring to Las Vegas that they will also gamble with. That's not always sort of like the point of the business, but it is a really important part of it because you're supposed to have your own network. Well, how do you get into other people's network? Is that you become friends with those people. So that was a big problem that the Fontainebleau had, was that they opened and they didn't have a, as they say, casino book for their host to grab from. So they had to just really sort of pump up getting people to come to the Fontainebleau to gamble with. So how does this sort of affect Vanderpump, which Vanderpump opened, I would say, last week? And I would say you're definitely looking at that place like they are rebranding. So it's not sort of much like opening a new hotel. It's more about rebranding the hotel. They've obviously redone the rooms. They've redone the casino. They've taken out a couple of the chandeliers. They put like new chandelier designs. But it is very much a rebranding effort that this is like the cool, hip hotel, which Caesars really doesn't have. Caesars Palace does, and this is the thing, is when you own multiple properties, is that then you try to keep everything at the same standard, but also have the hotels sort of create their own identity because you want everybody, not just one sect of people. A really good example of this is Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan was asked, why do you not support a candidate, basically? Like, why don't you support, I believe this was a very big deal back in North Carolina, that there was going to be like the first black senator or congresswoman or congressman going up against like a really like racist guy. And he didn't pick a side. He didn't endorse anybody. And they asked him, why don't you do that? And he says, Republicans buy sneakers too. So that is very much what it's like sometimes in the hotel industry, is that you have to be able to find all the different guests and bring them to your property. It's very, very important. So that does bring us to the upcoming opening of the Hard Rock Hotel, it's become an iconic construction project right in the heart of the Strip, this gigantic guitar. Nothing has been, and I love this, more Vegas than this guitar being built. It's a throwback to what Vegas used to be, a theme. It's big, it's bold, and that's the Hard Rock from just flying into town. I can only think about what it's going to look like when it's finished, when you're flying into the city. The Sphere is actually quite an iconic thing now, part of the skyline. But man, that guitar is going to look awful cool. But that is a property that everybody is kind of keeping an eye on with all of the job postings that they come out with, because that's where a lot of assistant managers, assistant directors will be looking at once it comes available. You'll start seeing a lot of those assistants looking to become, directors and managers of their own departments. And it's going to be very interesting. And the thing is that when you get to the sort of top tier part of the hotels, those positions are much harder to get and much more sporadic. So you're always kind of keeping an eye on your management teams and especially if they're high in demand management teams. So like your front desk managers, your general managers, obviously, managers of high end parts of the hotel, your casino hosts. I would say specifically in Las Vegas, casino hosts are highly coveted in terms of when new hotels open. Just because when they go, they take a huge Rolodex of people with them. And technically, when a casino host is fired or let go, they are no longer allowed, just like any other business, no longer allowed like on company computers, anything that it stores names. The thing is, that's why they usually have two cell phones. They have a work phone, they have a personal phone. I promise you that the personal phone probably has the names of their biggest players as well. It's not just on the work phone. Because, and this is the thing, is once you get to sort of the top tier levels, vice presidents, directors of casino marketing, they actually have to sign contracts to stay with those companies. So that is always very interesting to look at it that way. Your frontline employees, like your dealers, front desk workers, concierges, bellmen, I think bellmen are union, they are not privy to the same type of contracts, and they are usually able to move in and out kind of however they please. Usually you're not allowed to. This happens all the time. You can work at two different properties. It's totally fine. But sometimes it depends on the department. So like casino hosts are not allowed to work at two different properties. It's, I believe, higher level people are not able to work at two different properties. So it is one of those things. So it'll be very fun to see all the people that start moving over to the Hard Rock when it opens, which Hard Rock could not be in a better location to open a hotel. On the Strip, it is all about location, 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 and who are your neighbors. Your neighbors make up what you're going to be. And their neighbors are Caesar's Palace, Treasure Island, obviously, but you have Venetian Palazzo across the street that really bring up sort of the other end of it as well. The next property that I think will be imploded, it will be Circus Circus, and I hope it happens like as soon as possible. Anyways, so that's kind of what it was like to open a new hotel. I know it was kind of a lot of talking of like sort of the type of clientele that comes into properties, but hopefully you guys found that episode fun. I thought it was kind of fun to talk about. So make sure you follow us on all of our socials, Concierge Confidential _LV, and then my personal one, Brian _Ortega 26, if you want to see kind of what's going on in the movie world and obviously the life of hospitality. So, exciting news coming later in the week that I'll share with you guys. But until then, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Remember, if you see me out in town, come up and say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.